Hi, and welcome to So Many Things video series. We wanted to share this video series with you from Creative Grids, but we also wanted to add a little bit extra because we had them in the shop to do seminars and they were so awesome. So enjoy the videos and stay tuned for a bonus tip at the end.
The 6-inch Curvy Log-Cabin trim tool by Jean Ann Wright is a smaller version of the popular 8-inch Curvy Log-Cabin. Everyone wanted a smaller size because when you combine 4 of these to get a curvy effect, like in this block, it is 12 inches. The original was an 8-inch block, so when you combined 4 of them to get this curvy effect, or the effect of a circle, then it ended up being 16 inches. So the smaller version gives you a lot more potential for table runners, placemats, and things like that. The technique is exactly the same. It's just as much fun, and the smaller logs that are required to get the effect are not any harder to do in the smaller version than they are in the original. The ruler has all of the markings you need to be successful in this. There is a seam guide in the corner that has holes drilled right here for the center square. So you lay that over the center square, and if you notice, this is a scant 1/4 inch so that you are going to be successful in sewing a perfect seam allowance here. Once you have that perfect seam allowance here, that square is the same size all the way down the tool, and you'll be able to trim everything perfectly. There's a 1/4 inch seam allowance marked around the entire outside edge. There are dashed lines and solid lines that will match up with seam lines as you go, so you can keep your block square. And this is my favorite part right here. We have cut the narrow strips at least 1 1/4 inch wide, cut the wide strips at least 1 3/4 inches wide. So once you make one of these blocks, the tutorial on the ruler is all you'll need to be successful whenever you go to use this ruler. There are 2 different sets of squares on here. If you notice, the white one is the center square. When the block is complete, that is where the center square of the finished log cabin will be. And then this is marked narrow round 1 and narrow round 2. These are wide round 1 and wide round 2. So when I am trimming the narrow logs of the block, I will use these. When I am trimming the wide, I use these 2 blocks. You get the curved effect by adding narrow to 2 adjoining sides and wides to the other 2 adjoining sides. So now I'm going to show you how this works. Here is my center square, and it tells you on the ruler right here to cut the center square 1 1/2 inches. Now that is a little larger than you need, and so when I lay it here, mark with a water-soluble marker or a friction pen through the holes. I am going to sew between those dots to make sure my seam allowance is absolutely accurate. So now on this one, I have added the 2 wide strips, then the 2 narrow to the center square. And if you notice on the back, see how my seams are lined up with the blue dots, so you can see that everything matched exactly. And at this point, you'll also note that the block looks a little wonky because these are not all the same length or anything. It doesn't matter. I just use scraps and cut them off. That's the beauty of the tool, because by trimming everything around this center square, this is all going to end up being the exact size it needs to be. Now, when you're using a Curvy Log-Cabin trim tool, I'm going to use this wide round 1 to square up the 2 wide logs that I've added. And if you notice, because I followed that seam allowance, this square fits exactly over that. The solid lines are matching up with the seam lines. Now I could take my rotor cutter and trim 2 sides, and then I'm going to rotate the block and rotate the ruler so the narrow square is showing right here. These are lined up with the sides. Trim 2 more sides, and I'm going to end up with a perfect log cabin. Here are the wide, here are the narrow around the center square. By trimming each round as you go, you end up with perfect results. and because you're adjusting every step along the way instead of waiting to the end. And if you wait till the end, any of those discrepancies in the size of the logs are going to be magnified as you add each round, and then your block is not going to be perfect when you're done. So here is the second round. I've added 2 darks, then 2 lights. These are the wide, these are the narrow. And so I'm going to trim the wide first. I recommend when you're doing this that I stack all of the log cabins I'm doing. I trim all of the wide sides, rotate the ruler and the blocks, and then trim all of the narrow sides. And if you notice, once again, here is wide round 2, and see how that fits perfectly in there. And these dash lines are matching perfectly with the seam lines. I'll trim these 2 sides, rotate the block and the ruler, place the narrow round 2 over that square, and I check to make sure that everything's lining up on the outside, trim those 2 sides, and once again, look, I have a perfect log cabin. I'm going to repeat the process, adding 2 wide strips and 2 narrow strips, but this time all I have to do is put the center square over the center right here and line everything up, and I can pull this out a little bit to make sure that my seams are lining up, and that's just a little bit of distortion that happened when I was pressing. Trim around the entire outside edge, and there's my finished block. If you notice, you're getting a curved effect because the wides are sewn on adjoining sides of the center square and the narrows are sewn on the other 2 sides. So when I put 4 of those together, I get movement and a circular motion in my quilt. Now I can use this in place of any traditional log cabin block. We have, here is the 8-inch Curvy Log-Cabin, and you can see the difference in size with the 6-inch, but also make sure your customers realize that there are 2 different sizes, and that is a substantial difference in size if you look at this, 2 inches on 2 adjoining sides. We also, however, have the original log cabin trim tool, which makes traditional log cabins, and if you notice, these are the exact same size because I can mix curvy and traditional log cabins in the same project. We also have the 6-inch log cabin trim tool, which is a traditional log cabin that is included in the log cabin trim tool 2, which does 6 and 12-inch log cabins. And if you notice, once again, these are the exact same size, so I can mix and match these in my quilts to give me a multitude of different options. And as always, Creative Grids has a lot of companions for their projects, or for their rulers. Here are several cut loose press patterns that are available. And for instance, in ice cream cones, you can see that the curve of the top makes it look like the ice cream, and doing the darks on the bottom makes it look like the cone. This one, Fly Away With Me, makes it look like birds in flight because you can see the white birds here, and the way that the curves accent those gives it a totally different look. Here is a table runner which has the circles on it, and it gives a very modern look to a traditional block. Rainbow Swirls has these curves in here that makes it look like a very sophisticated pinwheel, but once again, you're just doing a very simple curvy log cabin that you can make in a matter of minutes. And here's Wiggly Worms that you can see by placing the finished blocks in a variety of patterns. You can get this rotation going up the quilt that adds movement to anything. So these are just a few ideas and what you can do with this ruler, and there are tons of options, as well as including it in any traditional log cabin pattern that you have already fallen in love with and have seen in other books.
So here's the bonus tip. Our teacher was teaching us about how to be smart about being scrappy. So we all love to be scrappy, but she gave us the tip, and this made so much sense. instead of just piling everything into one thing, you know, Christmas fabrics and Civil War fabrics and, you know, small florals and all those kinds of things, keep your scrappies together based on their theme. So keep all your Civil War scrappies together, and keep all your Christmas scrappies together, and keep all your floral scrappies together. Then when it's time to go make your scrappy piece, just choose one of those, and that gives a cohesiveness to the fabric. You get the great effect of the scrappiness, but you don't end up with sort of these oddball fabrics. And let's face it, not all fabrics work together. So we hope you enjoyed this tip.